Detective Ethan Carter had always known that going undercover could be the most dangerous part of his job, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of infiltrating the Dreadstone crew. A notorious gang responsible for a string of violent crimes across the city, the Dreadstone crew had eluded capture for years, operating in the shadows of the criminal underworld. They were methodical, ruthless, and had eyes and ears everywhere. For Carter, getting inside meant becoming someone else entirely, a man with no past and no future but the mission. His assignment was simple: gain the trust of the gang, climb the ranks, and gather the intelligence needed to take them down. The plan was risky, but it was the only chance the department had to dismantle the crew. Carter's superiors had assured him that they had it all under control, that they had prepared everything down to the last detail. But as he donned the persona of Alex Monroe, a hardened criminal with a penchant for violence, he began to realize that things weren't as simple as they seemed. The first few days were the hardest. Carter, now Alex, had to convince the gang's leaders that he was just like them. He had to prove himself with blood, sweat, and sheer audacity. The crew, led by the charismatic and volatile Dom Rojas, didn't trust easily, especially not newcomers. But Carter was good at this. He had done undercover work before, had assumed different identities, but this felt different. The Dreadstone crew wasn't just another street gang. They were organized, dangerous, and had a web of influence that stretched further than anyone realized. Ethan had never been more aware of how alone he was. His backup was non-existent. There were no second chances in this world. He had to play his part, stay in character, and survive. And yet, as the days passed, he began to feel the pressure of his dual life weighing on him. Every move, every word had to be calculated. One slip-up could cost him everything. It didn't take long for Carter to be thrust into the gang's activities. He was forced to participate in petty thefts, drug deals, and, eventually, more violent jobs. Dom watched him closely, testing him at every turn. But Carter passed every test, even when things went south. He had seen death before, had been in situations where people died for no reason other than someone else's ambition. It wasn't new to him, but it was harder to stomach when he was the one pulling the trigger, even if it was in the name of justice. There were moments when Carter felt himself slipping. The line between Alex Monroe and Ethan Carter blurred. The thrill of power, the camaraderie of the gang, the ease of violence, it all started to feel too natural. But he couldn't afford to lose himself. Not now. Not when he was so close to the heart of the operation. Then, one night, everything changed. Carter was sitting in a dimly lit room with Dom and a few of the higher-ups, discussing their next big heist. The plan was simple: hit a rival gang stash house, steal everything of value, and send a message. But just as they were finalizing the details, Dom's phone buzzed. He looked at it for a moment, his eyes narrowing, and then he turned to Carter. "We've got a problem," Dom said, his voice low. "We've got a rat." The word sent a chill through Carter. He had been prepared for the danger of the job, but this was something else entirely. A rat inside the crew meant someone was feeding them information, someone was working against them. And if the rat wasn't caught, they were all at risk. Dom's eyes flicked to Carter, then back to the others in the room. "We don't know who yet. But we'll find out. Nobody betrays us. Not without consequences." Carter's heart raced. He had heard rumors of leaks in the gang before, whispers of corruption within their ranks, but he never imagined that someone could be working against them. The idea that there was a traitor within the crew sent waves of paranoia through the room. Everyone was a suspect, and everyone was watching everyone else. As the days passed, the tension in the crew escalated. Dom grew more unpredictable, and the once loyal members of the gang began to turn on each other. The search for the rat became an obsession. The crew's operations became erratic, desperate. Carter's position in the gang became more precarious by the day, and he knew he had to find the rat before Dom did, because if Dom figured it out first, there would be no turning back. But what Carter didn't realize was that the rat wasn't just among the gang. The real betrayal wasn't in the Dreadstone crew, it was in the department. It started with small, inexplicable events. Carter's contact within the police force, Officer Jessica Hayes, had been his lifeline during the operation. She was the one who fed him intel, who kept him updated on the investigation. But one night, during a routine call, Jessica's tone changed. There was a hesitation in her voice, an uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "Carter, you need to be careful," she said. "I don't know how to say this, but something's not right. Someone in the department is leaking information. And I think they know you're undercover." Carter's stomach dropped. The realization hit him like a freight train. Someone inside the department was working with the gang, feeding them information, and using him as bait. He had been playing a dangerous game all along, but now he realized that the odds were stacked against him in ways he hadn't considered. Who could it be? Who in his own department could be feeding the Dreadstone crew the very information that would ensure their survival? Carter didn't know who to trust anymore. As the walls closed in around him, he had to make a choice: continue with the operation, knowing that he might be walking into a trap, or pull out and risk losing everything. But the deeper he went, the more he realized the true scope of the betrayal. His own people had been compromised, and there was no way to know who was loyal. The thought of a mole within his own department gnawed at him, and Carter found himself questioning everyone he had ever worked with. Was Jessica Hayes involved? Was she playing him? Could he trust anyone? As Dom's paranoia grew, so did the danger. The pressure mounted on Carter, who had to walk a fine line. He had to convince the gang that he wasn't the rat, all while trying to expose the traitor in his own ranks. It was a double-edged sword, and Carter knew that either way, he was running out of time. One night, things came to a head. Carter had been part of a robbery gone wrong, an ambush by a rival gang that had left several of Dom's men dead. In the aftermath, Dom's suspicions reached a boiling point. He gathered his remaining crew members and made it clear that someone had to pay for the betrayal. He wasn't looking for justice, he was looking for blood. "Someone in this room," Dom said, his voice seething with fury, "is responsible for this. And I'm not leaving here until I find out who." Carter's pulse raced. He knew that the heat was on him, but he couldn't back down. Not now. Not when he was so close to exposing the mole in his department. As Dom's rage continued to escalate, Carter made his move. He planted a small tracker on Dom's phone during a moment of distraction, knowing that it would lead him to the answers he needed. Hours later, the phone led him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. As Carter approached, he saw a familiar figure standing in the shadows, a figure he hadn't expected to see. It was Officer Jessica Hayes. She was meeting with Dom. Carter's heart stopped. The betrayal hit him harder than anything he had ever experienced. Jessica wasn't just an informant, she was the rat. She had been feeding information to the Dreadstone crew all along. And now, it was too late to stop the chaos. With no backup, no way to escape, Carter made the only choice he could. He moved in quickly, taking down the two men guarding the warehouse. It was a violent, desperate fight, but Carter knew what he had to do. He couldn't let Jessica's treachery go unpunished. In the end, it wasn't the Dreadstone crew that took him down. It wasn't Dom or the gang. It was the betrayal from within his own department that had nearly destroyed him. But Carter wasn't done yet. With Jessica in custody, he was one step closer to uncovering the full scope of the corruption that had festered inside the department. And as he looked into the darkness of the city, he realized that the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun.